This video was made possible through the support of my patrons. After taking a 6-week break from TV screens, Doctor Who was back for another season of adventures throughout time and space, comprised of 39 episodes. And to start this revolutionary second year of Doctor Who, we actually have a concept that had been bandied around since the show's inception. You may remember back in my review of An Unearthly Child that a concept from one of the first writers of the show, C.E. Weber, was to shrink the cast down in the debut serial.
One concept I had was that they return to Earth, but this time they're the size of ants, because I want the children, the audience, to understand the importance of size and the relativities of size, what it'd be like. And they come back into their same classroom where they started, but this time being fearful that some of the other kids are going to step on them and kill them.
While it was considered to be an interesting idea by Sidney Newman, the effects were thought to be too difficult for a brand new team to pull off, and there wasn't really much of a story idea being put forward. We have a premise of our TARDIS team being shrunk, but no actual narrative driving the story forward from that point. C.E. Weber dropped the idea, and it was later picked up by writer Robert Gould in September 1963, but he was unable to deliver a finished script. Gould would later drop all involvement with Doctor Who when, a few months later, he accused Terry Nation and David Whittaker of plagiarizing his concept of plants being at the top of the evolutionary chain in part 3 of The Keys of Marinus, The Screaming Jungle. And Whittaker's defense can basically be summed up as, "We didn't copy you, you might have copied Day of the Triffids, and the idea sucked anyway." Turn down for what? Anyway, Whittaker commissioned Louis Marks, whom he knew through the Screenwriters Guild, to write a 4-part story called Planet of Giants, originally part of Doctor Who's first production block with Season 1, but the broadcast was later held back to open Doctor Who's second season. Almost everyone involved would rather have opened Season 2 with the Dalek invasion of Earth, which would see the much-hyped return of Terry Nation's iconic mutants, but Susan leaves in that story, so Planet of Giants had to be shown first. But not only that, after all 4 parts were filmed, Donald Wilson, the BBC head of serials, felt like the story limped along to its conclusion, and requested that the serial be trimmed into 3 parts, resulting in the unprecedented step of taking the footage from 50 minutes of pre-filmed TV and reassembling it for a single episode. But let me back up. So this 3-part story opens with the Doctor's continued attempts to get school teachers Ian and Barbara back home to London 1963. However, there's some sort of malfunction, which causes the TARDIS doors to open when they dematerialise. And no, it's not an issue with the technicians like the unaired pilot.
What's happening to the bloody doors?
After the doors are forced shut, the Doctor is adamant that something must have gone horribly wrong and the group are lucky to be alive, even double-checking his granddaughter Susan's work with the fault locator and refusing to put the situation into terms that his human companions would understand. And we get this lovely moment where it seems like everything's fine and the Doctor apologises to his companions for his behaviour.
Well, happily no harm's been done. It's most puzzling. Oh, my dear Barbara, was I rude to you just now? So I'm so sorry. I always forget the niceties under pressure. Please forgive me.
There's nothing to forgive.
Thank you.
That's so great to see. He never would have done that a few serials ago. It just shows how much he's warming to his companions. Anyway, the TARDIS lands in a mysterious location.
It's only a model. Shh.
Anyway, the TARDIS lands in a mysterious location. The scanner explodes because it can't contain the image outside, somehow, and the group step into the unknown and discover large, strange rock formations, massive insects, all of whom are somehow dead, and at one point they find a giant matchstick box. Ian thinks they're in some sort of exhibition where everything is comically huge, but the truth is,
Well, these things haven't been made bigger. We've been made smaller. Smaller?
We have been reduced roughly to the size of an inch.
An inch?
You, me, all of us, and the ship.
Yep, the quartet have shrunk due to some technobabble about the doors being open when landing, which messed with the dimensions of the TARDIS interior. They've actually landed in a garden, and oh, that Monty Python joke was right, it really is a model. Now this garden is in contemporary London, and there's two men who are discussing a new insecticide that's about to go into production. We've got Arnold Farrow, a government scientist played by Frank Crawshaw, and Mark Forrester, the owner of a chemical company played by Alan Tilvern. Forrester has been behind an incredibly powerful insecticide called DN6, but needs government approval to start the manufacturing. However, Farrow refuses, as the formula is so destructive that it wipes out all insects, not just ones that are considered pests, but ones that are also vital to the ecosystem. With Forrester having sunk years of his life into the project and all of his money and his resources, rather than just change the formula or halt production, he decides to kill the scientist.
That's not thunder, surely.
It sounded more like an ancient cannon.
It's not long before Forrester's colleague, Professor Smithers, played by Reginald Barrett, shows up, and partly out of fear for his benefactor, and also just curiosity about what DN6 can do, goes along with the murder scheme and attempts to force through the production of DN6. Meanwhile, the TARDIS team, having seen the devastation the insecticide has caused, must try and stop the arrogance of man, despite only being an inch high. They're also against the clock, as Barbara has accidentally touched some of the poison and is slowly dying herself. Now, I'm of two minds about this conflict, with the corporate human drama taking place almost completely separately to the Doctor and his companions. What I do like is the change in style and tone. Since starting the show last season, we've been to the caveman era, futuristic alien cities, historical China and France, and that's just to name a few. So it's actually quite refreshing to see a petty business squabble in the 1960s between men with briefcases and comically sized guns. It's a vibe, is all I'm saying. However, the main issue with this subplot is that, well, Forrester's an idiot. He put everything in place for DN6's production, sunk all of his money into a formula that surely he knew would not be approved if he properly spoke to his scientists about it, and then he shoots a government minister and tries to trick his lead scientist Smithers into thinking it was self-defense, a lie so obvious that it's rumbled immediately.
I wouldn't try telling that story to the police if I were you.
Oh, why not?
Oh, don't be a fool. He's been shot through the heart from some feet away. Even I can see that, and I'm no expert.
And now that he's in too deep, he decides to fake Farrow's governmental approval over the phone, not by putting on a different voice or by making the call from Farrow's telephone, but by holding a handkerchief over the receiver of his own home phone and hoping that it muffles his voice enough to not be discovered, which he is.
Hello? Is Mr. Whitmore there, please? Arnold Farrow speaking. Yes? Oh, hello, how are you? Good, I'll hold on. The secretary asked me how I was. Told you it'd be all right.
Doesn't sound like Mr. Farrow at all.
And he instructs Smithers to dispose of the body by sinking Farrow's holiday boat and hoping the police think it's an accident, despite Farrow having a bullet in his heart. What a plonker! Now, I understand that the serial is going for arch characterization. Forrester is an evil corporate capitalist who will not take no for an answer, and to his credit, actor Alan Tilvern commits to the bit and delivers a satisfying to watch performance.
Do you know why I'm a success, Mr. Farrow? Because I've never allowed the word can't to exist. There's always a way, always.
But this guy's sheer stupidity at every step of the narrative breaks the credibility of the story, and that's a shame, because it's with this portion of the narrative, especially with the character of Farrow, that we get writer Louis Marks's mission statement for the serial.
But the very exhaustive tests I have made show that DN6 is totally destructive.
Well, that was the idea, wasn't it? I mean, Smithers says it'll even prevent locusts from breeding. Wipe them out altogether.
I don't think I'm making myself quite clear. There are many insects which make a vital contribution to agriculture, and these insects must not die. Did you know that?
Louis Marks's inspiration for this story was the book Silent Spring, written by conservationist Rachel Carson, named after the effect of birds and other creatures being killed by unregulated and harmful insecticides in the United States in the 1940s and 50s, ending the bird song of spring and the sounds of nature. Toxins that not only wrecked the ecosystem, but could even harm humans and contribute towards the growth of cancers. The most notable of these insecticides was DDT, which was approved by a negligent government and pushed by profit-driven chemical companies. It's genuinely mad watching this archive footage of DDT being used in streets and suburbs in the 1940s and 1950s with the morbid hindsight of knowing that it's a human carcinogen. They thought it could cure polio.
With the possibility of a serious infantile paralysis epidemic, health authorities of the city of San Antonio, Texas, attacked the germ carriers throughout the city. With the war-discovered DDT in special sprayers, sections of the city are blanketed with the insecticide in the fight to stop the spread of the dread poliomyelitis. Every suspected spot is sprayed. Even the streams are disinfected. Tons of DDT are used in this fight against the dread disease, whose principal target is the young. Again, war has contributed one of its discoveries to save life.
The narrative device of shrinking the cast so they can see the devastation that DN6 can cause is an effective one to get the point across. How worms and ants and bees are all succumbing to the poison. It doesn't matter if they're in the air, on the ground, or underground. It's also a really clever way to raise the stakes over the course of the serial. In part 1, the quartet are completely safe. DN6 has already ravaged the garden, and despite the impressive insect props, they are dead. Then as the group get closer to the house and Barbara comes to contact with the poison, it gives the story somewhere to go and the stakes can raise properly. Really clever sense of escalation, especially with the cliffhanger ending of part 1 when the group encounter Pharaoh's pet cat, Sammy, played by Noakes.
Grandfather!
It's a bit of a cop-out though, because Sammy just leaves the group alone. As an owner of 2 cats myself, that would never happen. They'd be dinner. Anyway, the group need to find a way to stop the spread of DN6 and get back to the TARDIS together. Easier said than done when they get separated, with Ian and Barbara hiding in the briefcase and they get taken inside the house, forcing the Doctor and Susan to climb up the drain pipe, which sounds absolutely ridiculous, but oddly enough, it comes across as reasonable when you think about it.
You thinking of climbing up the inside of it?
Yes, of course, my dear. There's no other way. If you go in there, you'll see it's all corroded, so there's plenty of hand and footholds. That chemical smell means that it's germ-free.
What can the group do when they're inside, however? They're so small that they're literally speaking on different wavelengths to humans. They'll sound like squeaks to humans and the group can't understand them either. It's clever inclusions like that which does a lot to sustain the idea of shrunken travellers beyond a couple of episodes. Susan shouts down the sink to project her voice so that her teachers can hear her. A simple task such as picking up a phone off the receiver is a Herculean effort requiring all 4 of them to lift up the handset, which is exemplified with these hilarious cutaways.
Are you ready? Yes. Barbara?
Yes.
Right, now, lift! Ready now? Lift!
And the task is made even more difficult with Barbara's condition worsening, and it's only at this point near the end of the serial that the group find out what's wrong with her.
The same umbrella. Insecticide. You didn't eat or drink anything?
Oh, no, certainly not.
She got insecticide on her hand. She touched it.
Well, she never told me. I never saw her do this. She did borrow my handkerchief.
Where were you then?
By that pile of seeds.
Yes, you see, she got it on the hands. And she rubbed it off on your handkerchief.
Why didn't she tell us?
You can't help her, can't you, Doctor?
It's short-sighted on Barbara's part, but you can understand why she did it. She did not want to be a burden on everyone and have them worry about her. It's a really well handled subplot in my opinion. It's even a nice lesson to teach kids watching that if something is wrong with them, it's probably best to tell someone so that they can help. Anyway, what really holds Planet of Giants together is the production work, led by Raymond Cusick. The giant insects are genuinely impressive, especially the still living fly that Barbara encounters in part 2. Seriously, this is a terrific moving special effect that rubs its limbs together and twists its head. Combined with clever writing, where the group can identify the material on the ground being cement, but it's so rough, but that's because they're so close to it. Stuff like that adds credibility to the idea that these 4 characters have been severely shrunk in a TV show on a shoestring budget. I even like the rear projections of the Pharaoh corpse in part 1 and the test tubes of the laboratory in part 2. The sink is a really cool set, and there's a real threat of the Doctor and Susan getting washed away or drowning at the end of part 1 when Smithers uses the sink to clean the blood from his hands. Thankfully, they do survive by hiding in the overflow pipe, and after raising the suspicion of the telephone operator, who calls back and rumbles Forrester's deception, sending her police officer husband to investigate, the group use a matchstick to ignite a gas main, causing an aerosol can of insecticide to blow up in Forrester's face. Surprisingly brutal. He's arrested and the group make it back to the TARDIS. They materialise properly, which dilutes the poison in Barbara's system and allows them to make another attempt at landing in 1960s London. Honestly, that's kind of it, as far as these 3 episodes are concerned. It's a fun runaround with surprisingly good effects for 1964 that kicks season 2 off in an unconventional way. I think all the main cast members are used really well, and Mervyn Pinfield's direction makes a game effort of putting this big idea on the small screen. I love his camera work, as well as how the operators move from mark to mark, rather than cutting and breaking up the action. Sure, it doesn't always work, like Susan not spotting the massive group of ants' eggs until the camera does, which reveals that they're only a few feet in front of her, but apart from that, I have very few complaints about this story's presentation. I like how the lights go out when the humans arrive as their shadow covers the set, how a gunshot sounds like a cannon, how the Doctor has to watch his step on the drain pipe so he doesn't fall in, just lots of little details that really add up. And of course, we can't forget that this was the debut story of composer Dudley Simpson. Mervyn Pinfield was impressed by his work the previous year on the anthology series Moonstrike, and his presence is notable from scene 1, with less a focus on ambience and more concrete melodies to give the story a much larger scale and more personality.
What do you mean, close the door?
Don't argue, dear boy. It's emergency. Close the door. Look forth.
We do still get the ambience, but it's the action music, in my opinion, that leaves an impact, and Dudley Simpson would go on to compose music for over 60 serials over the next 16 years. This is not the last time that we'll be bringing him up. Douglas Camfield directed the original Part 4, but because most of the footage from that episode made its way into the newly assembled Part 3, he got the directing credit as opposed to Mervyn Pinfield. Having worked as a production assistant under Waris Hussein on An Unearthly Child and Marco Polo, with him even being tasked with directing some film insert shots for the former, he makes his directorial debut here to great effect, though a lot of his work has been lost. Let's break down what happened with the original ending of the story, however. So while parts 3 and 4 were actually filmed and even edited together for transmission, the production were asked to combine the two. So the footage that did not make the cut was lost forever. It was junked. However, in 2012, for the DVD release of the story, Ian Levine set to direct a recreation since the original shooting and camera scripts still survive. Carol Ann Ford and William Russell were brought in to reprise their roles almost 50 years later, with impressionists and other actors coming in to play the remaining 6 roles. Obviously, it's a shoestring effort using footage already available, filming a couple of new insert shots, doing CGI effects for the new scenes with Sammy the cat, and no attempt at lip syncing, but it's meant to be a fun alternative preservation effort. But with this recreation, can we guess whether or not trimming Planet of Giants was the best thing to do? Well, on one hand, there are some really good inclusions which do benefit the story. Early on in part 3, Sammy drinks some of the leftover sink water and straight up dies because of the DN6, which further hits home just how dangerous the pesticide is. However, because the story stretches on longer, it just makes Forrester's deception even more ridiculous than they already were, which is quite a feat.
Fortunately, Farrow had plenty of these blank forms. We can write what we like in the report, providing his signature's on the bottom.
Can't be as easy as that.
That's a better one altogether. Almost perfect.
It will never stand up to a handwriting expert.
Oh, yes, it will.
But the Impressionists make a game effort of it, especially with this scene where the Doctor, voiced by John Guyler, and Barbara, voiced by Catherine Mount, conflict over whether or not to interfere once they see the effect that DN6 is having.
I agree. Let's get out of here. It's going to be harder to go down the sink pipe than getting up.
All the more reason to get going.
Yes, before somebody starts using that sink again.
Our roles seem to be reversed for once.
What do you mean?
Aren't I usually the one to condemn meddling, to urge that we leave well alone? But you see, my friends, this isn't just a minor little tragedy in some forgotten backwater. Some person has invented a way of destroying a planet. Totally destroying it. I cannot, will not, stand by and allow our whole planet to be emptied of life.
You've also got this scene where the group have to work together to copy the formula of DN6 because the original notepad is too big for the Doctor to see in one piece. A cool idea, and in the broadcast version, the group start and then we cut away to the group having already done it sometime later.
And Susan and Barbara, I want you to call out to me what you see written beneath you. Yes, this is the insecticide quite clearly.
But in the recreation, or should I say the original, they painstakingly transcribe the whole thing. And, oh boy, is it dull.
Now this will be the lower left-hand part. Begin here, Susan. Barbara, you work with her, please.
Right. The first part is CH and a little 2, followed by 2 dots and a colon.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
3 yards long again, Doctor, and 2 yards sideways.
Get on with it.
A C and an H, followed by a little 2.
Start calling your section now, my boy.
Same for the telephone operator and her police officer husband going back and forth as to whether or not there's something wrong, but it just goes on for so long. But then again, it's a give and take. In the original, there's no indication that the calls for help on the telephone will assist them, but in this version, they wonder if the frequencies that they're speaking are affected by the wires. We get a scene where the group almost choke in Smithers' cigarette smoke, are deafened by the phone's hold tune, we get the Chekhov's gun placement of the matches and the aerosol can, and the original cliffhanger ending for part 3 was the group's discovery of Barbara being poisoned, leading into part 4, originally titled The Urge to Live. The main change in the story is Smithers' continued reluctance, especially when he discovers the dead cat due to DN6 and he pushes back more against Forrester. But it just makes Forrester's continuing on with the plan, despite knowing it's capable of killing larger forms of life and maybe even people, it just pushes the character from a heavily flawed committed capitalist to just plain evil. But it makes more sense as to why Smithers does not go along with it in the end.
It's killed everything. Everything.
Smithers?
But, sir, every plant and tree will die. I don't want any part of this project. It's unconscionably fiendish.
I will not suffer your insubordination, and you will fall into line. Now!
Not until you step back from the brink of insanity.
I'll do no such thing!
And a lot of the final episode is just made up of the group having to excruciatingly make their way out of the laboratory, through the garden, then back to the TARDIS. It feels like for every good inclusion, there's something that just elongates the story unnecessarily. Honestly, if it was up to me, I would include the death of the cat and cut everything else. So I guess I side with Donald Wilson. Part 3 was the right amount of length for a story getting by, mostly on theming and production. Thankfully, due to the shortened length, it allows those elements to come to the fore rather than the genuinely wild behaviour of the story's antagonist and the full-sized human subplots. Honestly, there's even a case to be made that even if the Doctor and his friends weren't in this story, Forrester would still have been apprehended at Farrow's house because of how incompetent he is. Still, putting the characters right in the middle of a small-scale ecological destruction story was an inspired narrative choice, making Planet of Giants Doctor Who's first environmental serial, and it would hardly be its last. In the late 50s and the early 60s, Rachel Carson, the inspiration for this serial, campaigned hard for the government and corporations to stop pushing DDT, sounding the alarm for the environmental havoc unregulated pesticide manufacturing could cause.
Now, to these people, apparently the balance of nature was something that was repealed as soon as man came on the scene. Well, you might just as well assume that you could repeal the law of gravity. The balance of nature is built of a series of interrelationships between living things and between living things and their environment. You can't just step in with some brute force and change one thing without changing a good many others.
Unfortunately, Carson died a few months before this serial's broadcast due to breast cancer, being posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1980, but I'm sure that pales in comparison to being the inspiration to a decent Doctor Who story from the 1960s, of course. Anyway, join us next time as the Doctor does succeed in taking his friends home, but not to the Earth they were expecting to see. Terry Nation's Daleks are back, and now they're the masters of Earth, in an adventure that will cause the Doctor to make the ultimate decision in regards to his granddaughter. But as that serial's already been covered for Daleksember, next week we'll actually be jumping ahead, as the Doctor, Ian and Barbara must save a group of survivors stranded on an alien planet, in The Rescue. I'll see you then. Hey folks, thank you so much for checking out this review of Doctor Who Planet of Giants. This is part of a big, epic William Hartnell Doctor Who review marathon. We've just started Season 2, but we still have a long way to go. If you want to be updated on when I do more of these reviews, please consider hitting that subscribe button, hit that like button as well, because it really helps me out. Leave a comment below to appease the almighty algorithm, all that good stuff. Another way to support these reviews, however, is to support me on Patreon. Now, my patrons get these reviews several weeks, sometimes months early because of YouTube's content ID stuff. They also get access to a Mr. TARDIS Discord server, and so much more. You can be able to see that the patrons' names are scrolling down right now, these handsome, beautiful looking people, but I want to give a shout out to these particular patrons. Adam Grattan, Angus Bajanason, Ben Langdon, Callum Baird, Chiba City Blues, Dan the Dreamer Shill, Daniel Davis, Darius, Darkstar2189, Darren Carver-Bausigner, Dean Jones, Dr. Hadley, Dragon Bugs, Dylan Whitaker, Evil Dalek 79, Finley Rude, Flipseed, Ginger Animator, Hunter Graham, Jack D. Evans, James Ivory, Jared Saylor, Joseph Adams, Leela, Maria Bergman, Mario Fanboy 15, Matthew Perry, Michael Serrano, Miranda Logan, Nate Harris, Palex, Pat Andrews, Randall Sprinkle, Raven Woods, Reese Lloyd, Ross, Ryan Duncan, Samuel Whitaker, Scott Gerard, Taylor Wooderson, The Brit Sniper, The Doctor 14 Blu-ray Reviews, Timbo 1834, Toby Loxton, Will, and William Baker. Thanks so much to all of my patrons. You can find a link to my Patreon down in the description below, and folks, I'll see you all next time.